Welcome back, everyone. We are here on the special GMID edition of Hospitality Today Live. Our next guest, I'm very excited to introduce you to her. With 40 years of combined buyer-supplier experience in the meetings and incentives market, we're talking about CEO and founder Karen Devine, bringing a wealth of knowledge to the travel industry. And after working for some of the biggest leading incentive companies, travel companies, Karen began her career with luxury hotel companies and a leading worldwide DMC organization. Joining a luxury cruise line in 2000, Karen opened 3D Cruise Partners that allowed her team to bring instant cruise insider expertise to the meetings and incentive customers while providing immediate access and complete details for all cruise lines. And Karen will share with us today the state of the cruise industry. So grab your hat and suitcase. Hope you're ready to go cruising. We're going to be right back with Karen in a few minutes. Today's official title sponsor is Efficient Health Solutions, your preferred health insurance provider for the hospitality industry. EfficientHealthSolutions.com. Well, here we are with Karen. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's an honor to have you here because we've never really had somebody representing the cruise line sector of the hospitality in the history of the show, let alone here on GMID Special Editions. So it's just an honor to have you here representing the cruise industry.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I can't wait to talk about all the wonderful things going on with cruise.
Absolutely, absolutely. But before we do, I know our viewers are going to want to know more about your company, and also, what is 3D Cruise Partners? I love that title, but what does that mean?
Well, the truth of that is I have 3 sons, and I decided to name the company after them, and decided a long time ago that my 3 sons' travel was probably not quite the way I wanted to go. So I decided to name it 3D after my 3 boys.
Oh, excellent. That's a great idea. What a great story to share with everybody, no doubt. And your motto I picked up on is adding value, not layer. Well, what does that mean and how is that applied?
So I came up with that because what we wanted our customers to understand from that tagline specifically is that we're not adding another layer in the middle of them and the cruise lines. On the contrary, we are adding a benefit to them by having a direct contact for basically one-stop shopping for anything they'd ever want to know, but never ever at another layer, meaning it's not a delay, it's not an added cost, it's not anything other than a value that we bring across in what we do for the customer. So we represent the entire cruise industry. Anything that floats is another good motto to have, without adding a layer in between them and the cruise lines so that they understand exactly, I hope by that, what that means and it translates to them exactly.
So explain to the viewers what exactly you do, what your team does for customers and the cruise lines.
Sure. So we represent really the customer. So we're an extension of the cruise lines in that when I said a moment ago, anything that floats. So everything that a customer needs or wants to know relative to cruise is what we do. So if they need to know where is a ship, what is the newest built, when was it last refurbished, where is it floating, of course, how much it costs, whether it's available for a group or a charter, everything that there is to know is exactly what we do. So we represent the cruise industry from the perspective of representing them as an extension of their sales teams so that they know when we're calling them, we've got a very well qualified opportunity for them because we're working with the customer And just as our customers protect their interior teams or their customer, if it's a third party, for example, we protect them. So our job is to know the ins and the outs, the legalities, maritime law, everything there is to know about the cruise industry, so that they know they have a proper product to meet that specification to put in front of their stakeholder or their exterior client, whatever that may be.
Wow. And so what that makes it sound like is a lot of people will book their cruise, and even meeting and event professionals will call the cruise line directly to try to, book a meeting or incentive, event of a group. But yet really where they should be starting with first is you and your team to really get those insights.
Yeah, because I mean, what I love about what we do is our job, and I mentioned it a moment ago, is to protect the customer. So making sure we have their back, making sure that we know all the ins and outs, what can be negotiated, what can't, and more importantly, why. Because oftentimes when we get to the contractual stage, and because a cruise is quite different from a land program, the understanding of the terminology of that maritime portion of the cruise contract is really important. So explaining to their legal team or their risk team or their executive team, whomever it may be, is exactly what we do, and trying to protect their interests to the greatest extent possible. And also with what 3D and others do is in representing the cruise industry for the customer, is making sure that they understand what their options are, right? Because when they've got an expert involved from within the cruise industry, we know what those ins and outs are. And it's just the famous saying of, you don't know what you don't know. Right. And I found it very interesting early on in my cruise career that while the cruise industry is so small by comparison to the world of hotel and DMC and travel, it moves constantly, it shifts constantly, and people don't work in that space every day. So having a partner who is literally in that space every day and can answer a question like that is really beneficial to them.
Yeah, and a great example of that was when we got hit by the pandemic. And the cruise line got hit. I mean, literally there were people, hundreds of people out at sea, stranded for days from what I remember. And yet if they were with you, they would have been able to have a contact on land and, as you say, protect them. You would have been able to really help walk them through what needs to be done while they're out there at the same time. So I really see a huge benefit in utilizing your services for something just like the pandemic.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. It became, I knew the value of what we did well before all of that happened, but my goodness, I could have never guessed the incredible additional value that came with just the knowledge from within the cruise industry and helping people work their way through what happened with COVID. And as important was ensuring that somebody, and I noticed very early on in this, that our industry wasn't responding proactively. And that's not a negative. At the time, nobody knew what was going on. Nobody knew what this was. And those two very infamous, all over the news products in Asia, those two ships really brought it home quickly. And that's really what happened from there with the cruise industry. But there was much, much more to that story that I then got on my own personal soapbox and started a series called, I reversed it and started calling it Reality versus Perception, in an effort to bring facts, figures, statistics that were very easy to find, but they weren't getting reported. So it was really interesting to navigate, no pun intended, through all of that. But you're right, having an expert in the cruise industry to guide, it became so valuable to our customers many of whom I said, hold on, wait, let's figure this out. Let's figure out what we need to do. Let's get you where you need to be. And honestly, the cruise industry responded so positively as well, because they also were trying to figure out what to do and how to deal with everything that was happening so quickly because of what we saw in the news, right? Yeah. Everybody in the world saw what was on the news in Asia.
Yeah. So. Right. So your relationships with the cruise lines must be extremely tight.
It is.
To know not only, who's handling groups on there, but the people that are making the reservations, the food and beverage areas, the activities director, all those areas. And I mean, you really are in the know, and anybody that takes advantage of utilizing your services, that's a one-stop shop that they don't have to spend time on.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, you never know what you do earlier in your career, how it's going to lead you or where it's going to guide you in the future. But having a background as a customer and having planned so many programs over the years, and then having a hotel background, and then coming into actually working for a cruise line gave me such a well-rounded experience to now know what the customer's looking for and know how to, turn that venue space on the ship into something private for them, and know what the food and beverage can be and how it works, or theming and decor and so forth on the ship. So yeah, there's all these little intricacies that you walk onto a ship and you don't necessarily know what you could do for your group or for your charter. So that's exactly
Right. Well, with all your credentials, I guess that's why you have your CITP, which stands for
Certified Incentive Travel Professional, which is a site designation.
Oh,
so
okay.
It's a course that we take. And yes, I'm very proud of that because it's a very involved course that customers and suppliers can take. We all take it together at various site events throughout the country. But it's challenging. It's quite interesting. And the background of customer, hotel, DMC, cruise line, et cetera, really helped me with the test. And it's a pretty involved test.
And with your background, being in the hospitality industry, I would imagine sets you apart from your competitors that customers can actually, get in touch with too. So you really stand out among a lot of them, including the cruise line, just because of your credentials and your background and expertise.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I mean, I think, it's one thing to certainly have a customer's perspective and understand who's sitting across the desk from you. But it's also another to have the geography. And a big part of cruise conversations is, the product is one thing, but the geography is quite another. And, long ago, I had an introduction to a Maritime Program where we can actually time our own itineraries, which the cruise lines, don't necessarily cringe at anymore because they trust me. But I can literally talk to a client and figure out how long it takes to get from point A to point B, for example. And that's hugely beneficial when you're planning a charter, for example, and saves a tremendous amount of time for them as they're trying to figure out what logistically can work.
Right. That makes sense. Definitely. Well, we know that during this pandemic time, the cruise sector was really singled out. There was some really rough waves because of, the turbulence that was created. I mean, and the industry, went to a risk level of 4, which is the highest at one time. But with that turbulence, there's this comeback as well. And I believe the cruise line really showed some resiliency and, collaboration with resources but yet confusion. And the CDC recommended, to avoid cruise travel cases on board, because of, thinking that the pandemic and the COVID was going to attack everybody on board. But it's what I'm hearing as far as the safety and the security on board the cases were fewer than when they were on land. Can you explain how that worked?
Oh, yes, I can. Thank you for that. So I'm going to go back in time for just a moment. So in the beginning, when this all happened, and I've mentioned a couple of times now, the 2 ships that we all saw in the news early on, in March of 2020, when the cruise industry actually voluntarily shut down, the actual statistic was 0.0006 of cases of COVID on ship as compared to land. That is huge, and people don't necessarily know that. So spending just a second on that history is when that happened, and we all saw it happen, at the time, the ships were not allowed to disembark the guests on land because land didn't know what in the heck was going on. Nobody did. There was no treatment, no idea what it was, no masking, certainly no vaccination. So the ship they did exactly what they knew how to do, which was shut it down and quarantine on board, which I've told this story many times, but it's why only 700, and I'm not suggesting that's a positive number by any means, but it was 700 contracted COVID on that first ship versus 3,500. Why didn't it spread throughout the entire ship? Because the ship shut it down. They know how to mitigate virus. So they did the only thing they could do, which was quarantine. So then fast forward, there was a healthy sail panel that was put together by the combination of Royal Caribbean Group and Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings. And those two companies came together and they formulated the Healthy Sail Panel, which was led by a former HHS secretary and a former FDA commissioner. Those two gentlemen, together with an entire team of medical experts, put together the protocols that got the ships back in the water in June of 2021. So we went from the no sail order to the conditional sail order because of all the protocols that were put in place at that time. Then we got to January of this year, 2022, and it became the conditional sail order expired on January 15th and became a voluntary opt-in, which most of the cruise lines have done. Why? This is the best part of all. The cruise industry, which many people don't know, is the only aspect of travel that has to report to the CDC. Think about that for a second. It's why we know the numbers. So as I got onto this reality versus perception series over the last 2 years, the point was the statistics just don't lie. They are very easy to track. These numbers are all reported to CDC because the cruise industry has to report to CDC. So we know the numbers. So we started calculating those numbers, which is where these statistics come from. So I've been putting all this information out there on social media and every opportunity, and I'm so grateful for this today and every opportunity we've had, because it's a perception issue more than it's actually factual issue relative to cases on board. Again, why? Because the protocols are so specific. So when you think about a cruise, I mean, there's nowhere else you can go right now that is required testing, required vaccination for all crew and guests over 12, required masking for all crew. You can sit next to, as we all have, right, or many of us in this business, I'm sitting next to someone on an airplane who's masked, but I have no idea if they're vaccinated or tested, or you don't know. On a ship, you do. And because the protocols have worked so brilliantly, there has, statistically speaking, been less than 1% occurrence on ships worldwide since they resumed. That's huge. And you can't compare that to anywhere during Omicron or when Delta or anything was going on. That is incomparable to anywhere else that we've seen. So because of that, the CDC took us down literally day before yesterday to level 2. So we're immensely proud. And of course, the protocols are continuing to evolve. We're seeing mask mandates start to be eliminated everywhere. We'll see things start to probably reduce further on ships, but because it's working so well and because of what happened to them early on, it may be a little bit longer before we start to see more and more of that relaxing. We don't know yet exactly where that's going to go, and we get asked that all the time, but I go back to the same thing over and over again in that the facts just don't lie. The statistics are there. And I've asked people throughout this entire last couple of years, please read the articles, not just the headlines, because the headlines used to say outbreak at sea. And I'll give you just a very specific example of that, where this was 6 months or so ago. There was an outbreak on a Royal Caribbean ship that literally was a ship that had no guests on board. There were 14, I believe, crew members who tested positive. They were on their way to get their crew vaccinated, but yet the media had it as outbreak on board. So it was just so out of context. So it's a statistical conversation, and it's a context conversation that we've really tried to focus on in order to shift the perception back to positive. So now you don't see cruises on the news anymore. Why? Because there's nothing negative to say, right? So the protocols are working well. The ships are back in the water. People are safely cruising. And slowly the perception shift is now changing, which is wonderful.
Wow. Well, it sounds like the ships were under a highly controlled environment, right, with the science-backed measures that you were just talking about that not many of us knew about. So again, this is getting to the facts, getting to the nuts and bolts of what's really going on by talking to somebody like you.
Yeah, and there's one more important point, if you don't mind, that I mentioned.
Yeah.
Yes, the protocols obviously were a huge part of that, but also something people didn't know was there's contact tracing that's done on board. There's also fresh filtered air. Most ships, if not all now, have either HEPA or MERV 13 filters. So that's also a big deal that people understand. It's not just the testing and vaccination protocol, but it's also the onboard filtration, the food service, the safety aspects. And one important point for people to know, and you mentioned this early in today, is the ships turned away. That no longer is an issue either, because as ships have resumed, there is a protocol in place for every ship with every port of call visited. so that, and I'll say when, not if, someone tests positive on board, there is a very specific protocol in place in partnership with the port of call to ensure the guests, if they have to be disembarked because of wherever they are in the middle of the cruise, they can be quarantined on board or disembarked shoreside. They're taken care of in a hotel, quarantined until they test positive and taken home. So there is a very specific protocol so that ships aren't stuck at sea. That was another sort of misnomer that only happened because of what was going on early on when ports, sure. I mean, who would want something coming in when you didn't know what you had to deal with, right? That all got handled very, very, very well by the Healthy Sail panel and everybody's sense.
Right. So at this point though, Karen, what's the confidence level of passengers wanting to get back into cruising?
So separating what we all do for a living in the meetings and incentives industry, the retail guest has been lined up to get back on ships forever. They're confident, they get it, they understand. On the group and incentive side, I would say starting about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we have started to see a huge increase in requests. And that to me just translates to the fact that people now understand. The cruise industry has done a phenomenal job of communicating these protocols and the numbers. You know, those of us out there that do this for a living too have been doing the same thing. So I know that people are starting to regain that confidence to cruise. They understand how safe it is. They understand what the protocols are, and they're looking at future cruising for meetings and incentives, which frankly in our world is future anyway. So I think there's a trust factor now that, and again, we're not seeing anything on the news that's negative, which is wonderful, right? So it just speaks to the security of the industry. And with that, and the growth that people are seeing in the cruise industry, which is probably where we're going to go next, I think that people have regained a lot of confidence.
Good to hear that. Good to hear that. And when they do eventually get on board again, I understand there's new products that are available, new things to do. That, during this COVID time, I think the cruise industry was thinking of, okay, how are we going to up our game? What are some of the new products that are being introduced?
So relative to new products sailing or new products on board or both?
Both.
Yes. So on board, what I think is really important for our industry to know is as new ships are building, they are working every day to create new experiences on board. So I can't exactly blanket that statement with throughout the cruise industry, but what you'll find is I won't say renewed interest, just an interest overall in accommodating group requests and charter requests relative to the onboard experience. So what does that mean? That means that we can customize shore excursions. It means we can take over restaurants for private dining. We can do theme decor. We can do so many cool things now with customization of ships, regardless really of the size of ship. So it's across the industry because the industry obviously has great big, ocean going cruise ships. And then they have medium size, smaller size, expedition, river. There's so many aspects of cruising, and all of them are so interested in creating a unique and customized onboard experience. So I think that speaks across the board for the industry as far as what they're willing to do. Then we have, and this is a great statistic, but throughout COVID, and we won't maybe say that word anymore, I hope soon, but we had about 16 ships delivered in 2020, 21 more came in 2021, 30 something coming this year in 2022, and 70 more are still on the new ship order book. So that speaks to the resiliency of the cruise industry as well, in that all aspects of cruise are building. And with new builds, we also get new technology, new innovations, new onboard experiences. So I think what this market should know, back to what I said a second ago, is how interested and accommodating the cruise industry is in ensuring that that's a special experience for a group on board. Of course, a charter, you're taking over the whole ship, so you can do what you want with it in most cases, but groups as well. So I just think that's important that people know that. And there's venue space to back that up.
Yeah. So for the meeting and event professional or the incentive person has never booked their groups on a cruise ship before, knowing all those new cruise lines are coming is exciting, because right now there's a lot of, shortage of venues on land.
Yes. Yes.
So if somebody's never utilized the, putting their meeting on, on a ship, this can open up a whole new thing for them if they would look into that.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I think it's a I don't think, and it's interesting, as often as in my space every day is cruise, I still talk to clients and very experienced clients every day who don't know what I just said, in that you can take over a restaurant, you can take over a lounge, you can do a full-on business meeting. And by the way, on a cruise ship, all of your AV is included. So that's a huge budget saver too, because if you think about, particularly with some of the larger ships, they have those beautiful review shows and incredible shows that they do in their theaters. Well, that green room, that AV booth, that sound, all of that is ours to utilize. So it really does, it just sometimes requires a little bit of explanation, sometimes a little bit of creativity, but the venue space that's available on so many of these ships fits this market so well. It's just a matter of people understanding what they have.
Yeah, and it would definitely have everything inclusive, which makes their billing and their invoicing on the back end so much easier because it's all together, in other words.
No question, the meeting planner loves that because it's like an all-inclusive, right? You can build onto, you can add a beverage package or a Wi-Fi package or whatever, or shore excursions, whatever you want to make it fully all-inclusive. Or, depending on how the budget allows. But yeah, even starting just with all the meals and entertainment already included is, gives them such a bottom line advantage anyway. To the point where, I mean, we've been saying for years, I mean, and I love our hotel friends and our ground destinations because it's what I did for a long time as well. But a cruise literally can represent about a 30% savings overall, apples to apples, when you're looking at something like that because of the all-inclusive nature of a ship.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Yeah. And it's great because you're not like at a hotel where you have one point of contact. On a cruise ship, you're there with all the point of contacts. They can't escape from you.
That can be challenging and that could be an advantage.
Yeah, exactly. There's pros and cons to it.
That's exactly why when we talk with a customer and we get their specifications of what is important to them, and then associating the correct ship and ports of call and destinations with what they want. Because sometimes they want to let people go and be off and you want a port every day. Sometimes like, no, we're a meeting. We want everybody together and we want sea days. So it just depends on what they're looking for.
Exactly. So what is considered a group on a cruise line? On land, it's 10 rooms or more, but is there a minimum, a maximum amount, or does it depend on the cruise line?
It depends on the cruise line, but roughly 10 cabins can become a group. It's roughly the same.
Okay, great. And I would imagine group rates are, pretty good deals compared to an individual passenger.
Yes. Well, the entire value add, 100% yes, because there are group rates that are available. It's also a ton of value add that you get with that group rate, be it, complimentary cocktail parties or the meeting space or the AV or whatever it may be. But yes, collectively speaking, the package itself over retail is very advantageous, not to mention the terms and conditions also relative to deposit and attrition. A lot of people don't realize how incredibly client friendly the attrition schedules are on ships.
Okay, good to know too. Wow.
For groups.
I've talked to meeting and event professionals that have had their meetings or events on cruises, and they're all successful stories. It's amazing, and they want to repeat too. The attendees are like, let's do this again because there's a lot of benefits behind it. You can bring your family, that you're all together. Nobody's really going to be, going off through a whole city and you can't find anybody. I would imagine there's other benefits that the attendees really can see.
They do. I mean, there's a I think probably the number one comment that we get is you literally pack and unpack one time and you're in 2, 3, 4, 5 countries. So it's incredible the experience that you get on a cruise and the taste of all these different places that you get, yet you're coming back to that creature comfort and home base every night. So that guests really love that. And there's a lot of flexibility in things to do, both on and off ship. So if we have a client that's looking for more destination immersion, then we're looking for an itinerary that allows late port of calls, for example. So I will stop just short of saying there's a cruise for everybody, but just about. And if given the opportunity, I'll find it.
Yeah, I know you will, definitely. So where's the most popular destination for groups and incentive groups to go to?
It's so tough. I mean, it's so tough. I mean, that's, again, the beauty of the cruise industry is you can pick a 3 or 4 night Bahamas or Caribbean. You can pick a 3 or 4 night river cruise. You can pick a 7 night Mediterranean. I mean, it runs the gamut based on, at least what we see, based on the the level of travel experience of the customer. So those that have been traveling, exotic trips and worldwide for years might look at, the Mediterranean, or the Baltic will come back at some point, we know, or Northern Europe is becoming very popular. Greece is always popular, but there's just as many people now that are looking to stay closer to home, perhaps, and Alaska is something they've never done. Or a domestic river cruise is something they've never done. Or an international river cruise is something they've never done, which is so fun. So there's just so many different aspects. So it's really, our job is to try to think of everything in and honestly out of the box that we can come up with. And sometimes there's all these, oh my gosh, I didn't know I could do that on a ship. And that's what we love to do every day, is introducing people to the idea and the concept of the flexibility and the experience of cruise travel.
Well, it'd be great for any of the viewers watching today here on GMID that definitely try something new and different by contacting you to get that conversation going. And I mean, why not, as a meeting and event professional, educate yourself to something unique and different. We are global, and our people are looking for new things and new experiences than just the typical, ballroom look. So I highly recommend anybody that's watching right now to contact Karen and get that conversation going. Which, by the way, I do have your contact information, so they can do that. Which is your email and your website for more additional information. Is there anywhere else that people can reach you?
Follow on social media. We put so much information out there on what's new, what's happening, what protocols are developing. So please follow us on social media, because we make it our job to be an unbiased resource. And that means literally representing the entire cruise industry for you, for the customer, to make sure that they know they've got someone on the other end of the phone or email that is looking at their best interest, which is exactly what I said in the beginning. So we aren't tied to any particular cruise line. We want to make sure that we find the best fit at the best budget and the best experience for every individual client, because they're all different with what they're looking for.
Very well said. Very well said. And with a one-stop shop type of effect, I can't imagine anyone not calling you, especially with your background and expertise in the hospitality industry. And we are just so grateful for you to be here with us, to give us an enlightening of what the cruise line is all about. And boy, I wish you all the success.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I so appreciate it. On behalf of the cruise industry, we're very grateful.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, happy GMID.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.